All right. First rule of this channel, we not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So this is going to be the 2024 tight end target video, the positional breakdown. I think that's what I'm going to call it. Anyway, we're going to be looking at the league winning upside guys, the guys that are going at the correct value or incorrect value, that type of thing, and how I'm going to put these things together with other positions towards finding the right guys to win my leagues overall. In general, the idea behind this tight ends, it's pretty simple. Like, is he the first or second guy in the offense? If he's not, like that guy can be someone else's problem. Does he have a story to tell me how he can get there? No, that guy can be someone else's problem. And then it's just like all about price shopping and knowing who I'm giving up to go get that guy. There's going to be very few guys that have like league winning upside, like the target list. I can bring this one up. Not my target list, but close enough. There's going to be very limited guys that I look at and go like, this guy can win me a league. And that's either because of price, or that's going to be because like overall value to the player going in a certain place in the draft. So when I talk about like a Rashad White and I go like, he's got a chance for a legendary upside season, it does not mean that I think he's going to get there, but it means relative to the other guys that are going there, I think at the price that he's going at, like I'm going to pay to find out, right? There's going to be other guys like a Josh Jacobs that I go like, I may have a 17-point a game running back one, and those guys don't grow on trees, even though that's not going to have like that legendary league winning type of upside like with these guys. So when we start breaking down the tight end position, I don't want a wide receiver 3 in my tight end spot. I want a wide receiver 1 in my tight end spot. And if I can't get that guy, like why would I be drafting that guy at the price to find out? And there are going to be guys that are like general punts, and like we can look like a Pat Fryermuth and go like, well, that's good enough at the price that I'm spending. 133 overall to get a mid-level tight end 1 is probably not bad, as opposed to getting a mid-level tight end 1, but I'm spending like a third round draft capital on that guy. So anyway, talking about Sam Laporta last year, he was the league winner because of capital put in. He was not a league winner based off production. He was the tight end 2 when it came to points per game. Travis Kelce was still the number 1 when it came to points per game. It was all about the fact that Sam Laporta went for free, and then he had statistical outliers in the tight end touchdown department. He didn't even have 900 yards passing. We know what it takes to get a league-winning tight end. We've seen these Travis Kelce unicorn seasons we're looking at, like 2022, 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns. That's not what Sam Laporta did last year. 2020, 1,400 yards, 11 touchdowns. 2018, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns. We could go find like Mark Andrews. He's put up one of those numbers. 2021, 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns. We can go even to like your George Kittle's. He may not meet the criterias anymore, but like his second year in the league, he did 1,300 yards, 5 touchdowns. He also had 11 touchdowns in 2022. Like we know what it takes to find these guys, and we know what it takes to find these guys at cost. That's what made Travis or Sam Laporta so valuable last year. I mean, don't be that guy. Don't be that guy that spends third round draft capital or second round draft capital and gets basically a wide receiver 3. Like that's not a good way to win your league. So we'll be breaking this down a little bit more as we get into it. You see, last year, your league settings and my league settings may be a little bit different. And this one on Fantasy Pros, half point PPR, 11.5. Now, we can time travel a little bit, and we'll go to 2022, that legendary season with Travis Kelce, where he did 15.4 points a game. That'll win you a league. If you're pulling the trigger and you're getting 11.4 Sam Laporta, it doesn't matter. The only thing that made Sam Laporta valuable was the cost. If I'm getting Evan Ingram at 10.2, it doesn't really matter at that point. If I'm getting 10.2 Evan Ingram, or I'm giving Trey McBride for free off the waiver wire at 8.3, like they're the same road to win a league at that point. And I'd rather get the Trey McBride based off usage, and we'll break that down a little bit more. So I have the wide receivers pulled up, and there's a reason why I have the wide receivers pulled up, and that's because we want a wide receiver that's a tight end. That's how I win a league. So in this case, like we're probably not going to get a 30% target share tight end. We can get a 25% target share. I was looking at it earlier. Darren Waller had a 27.7% target share. Those unicorn type seasons, they're like 25, 26% target share from those guys. So we can generally go, hey, what makes a wide receiver valuable? And then go, can we get that out of a tight end position? Because that's how we're going to win leagues. If we can't do that, like, you run your roster the way that you want. I can narrow it down to about 4 guys at cost, and then a couple other guys if my league mates decide to actually be savvy at fantasy football. And we're going to be looking at this. These are all my stats real quick. The difference, to bring this up real fast, Kyle Pitts last year, yards before reception, 10.1. You want to know why he had such a hard year? It's because those are the low efficiency plays that have like the higher production that comes out of them. Why is Evan Ingram so overvalued this year? 4 yards per reception. He's a check down monster. The other thing that we can look at, like when we look at these guys, like it's not just about pure targets. That's great. You know, the king of fantasy football is always going to be opportunity. The queen's always going to be efficiency. A guy like Evan Ingram, 9 red zone targets. We get 23 from Jake Ferguson. So again, like we're looking for a particular thing when we look at these guys. Number 1 and number 2 in their offense, they should be the team's red zone option. We're still chasing a little bit of touchdowns when it comes to that. We want vertical shots. We just don't want the check downs. We want like those guys that like can be a George Kittle and go, I'm going to take every one of them to the house. And the difference between, you know, George Kittle doing 8.3 yards per reception and Evan Ingram doing 4, when George Kittle leads all tight ends last year on 65 receptions, 1,000 yards, 1,020 yards, as opposed to Evan Ingram, 143 targets, 114 receptions, 963 yards. And then George Kittle, like 6 receiving touchdowns. Evan Ingram, I think, had 5, something like that. We'll break these down a little bit more. So to start off with, like Sam Laporta, overvalued. Travis Kelce, overvalued. Travis Kelce, I'll get out of the way real quick. He's going to be 35 this year. You can talk about whether or not that efficiency was down because, you know, he came in the season a little bit injured. Father time is undefeated. Tight ends can be sub-elite until late into their 30s. We've seen that with Antonio Gates. We've seen that with Tony Gonzalez. That's not actually the biggest issue besides age with Travis Kelce. The bigger issue is you're not going to likely get that top end ceiling of a unicorn season because they brought in Hollywood Brown. They brought in the rookie Xavier Worthy, and Rashee Rice basically turned into the red zone guy last year for the Chiefs. It's a difficult road to say that like you're going to get that bounce back to a mid-level wide receiver 1, and that's what made Travis Kelce so valuable. 2022, he finishes like wide receiver 5 overall if he was a wide receiver. That's what we're looking for. If you get this like 900-yard, 5 touchdown season from Travis Kelce, and you're spending like a 2nd or 3rd round pick on it, that's probably not the best utilization of capital. In this case, I will bring up Fantasy Pros all the way down here. There are other guys in this range. If I got the opportunity to get like your Marvin Harrison Jr.'s or your Drake Londons, I'm either going to have to go up and get a guy because I like him enough, or he has to fall to me at cost. And then I have to make up my mind why I didn't already go up and get that guy. So certain guys like a Marvin Harrison Jr., Travis Etienne, a Drake London, even the elite level quarterbacks. And we talked about that meta with the quarterback target video. Like I'm going to go up and I'm going to spend on those guys in a way that a imperfect Travis Kelce probably can't win me a league. You know, that's the difference. Like maybe I get like a very solid pick as a tight end. There's other guys that may be able to outvalue that relative to their cost, and they're going to hurt me very much less if they don't fulfill what I think they can do. So the other thing with Travis or with Sam Laporta, when we go on to him, is I generally think he's a good player. That's not what the conversation is about. It's how many more targets we can get, how much more efficient those targets can be within the offense, considering the other guys that are around. So I can get into like an 1,100-yard, 10 touchdown Sam Laporta season. And if he's going as tight end 1 or tight end 2, and I have to spend like a 2nd or 3rd round pick on it, and your Dalton Kincaid has a unicorn season, your Mark Andrews has a unicorn season, your Trey McBride has a unicorn season, or even with Trey McBride, if Trey McBride has an 1,100-yard season, but he's going at like pick 60, and you pull the trigger on Sam Laporta in like the late 2nd, early 3rd of your draft, the guy who pulled the trigger on Trey McBride and got the same production won the draft. So just remember that when you're looking at Sam Laporta. I actually have last year's stats for the Lions pulled up. If we're projecting that the Sun God, and I can bring him up when it comes to this, when we're looking at like the Sun God and he's going like wide receiver 7 or 7 overall, wide receiver 4, we're expecting something along the lines of the same production last year, this year. And remember, in fantasy, we're not drafting last year's production. We're drafting this year's range of outcomes. So if we're expecting something along the lines of the same range of outcomes with the Sun God, and we're expecting Sam Laporta to take a step forward, and we're expecting Jahmyr Gibbs to be a league winner, and we're expecting Jameson Williams to have some type of like substantial role within the offense, there's only so much of that vacated Josh Reynolds that we can give to other guys in the offense. We can cannibalize Josh Reynolds. We can give a little bit to Sam Laporta. We can give a little bit to Jameson Williams, but then that generally doesn't mean that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to take that step forward. So you really have to pick, if you're going to go after these Lions, which is the guy that you think is going to be the guy that takes a step back. I generally think it's going to be the Sun God, even though I don't think Sam Laporta is going to have this unicorn type season. I generally think that the Sun God is probably going to take a step back. 1,500 yards is a lot. 10 touchdowns is a lot. I can give some of those yards to Sam Laporta. He still can't return on investment. That's what I would generally look at with that. And if you get Jameson Williams taking a step forward, the Sun God remains consistent, and Jahmyr Gibbs takes a step forward, then Sam Laporta doesn't, and you really overspent on the guy. That's why there's probably way too much risk. You're buying his ceiling, and there's a lot of too much risk baked into that overall. So I would stay away from the age and competition with Kelsey, and generally the competition with Laporta relative to price. Now we can move on to the actual targets. I can pull this up real quick. I got my notes going on. So on Fantasy Pros, you're looking at Mark Andrews going 50 overall, Trey McBride going 51 overall. Dalton Kincaid is going 67 overall, and then Kyle Pitts is going 81 overall. These are the league winners. That's the long and short of it. They can finish as the number 1 or number 2 in their offenses, and that's it. Like, none of these guys are projected to be anything lower than the number 2. And in the case of Mark Andrews, Mark Andrews and Dalton Kincaid, they project to be the number 1. Now I'll get into Dalton Kincaid here in a second. Kyle Pitts and Trey McBride likely are the number 2s in their offenses. Trey McBride probably has a slightly higher ceiling relative to being the number 1 in the offense, even though it may not matter overall when it comes to Kyle Pitts, because the offense may generally just be like the highest volume passing offense, and he can get home in a lot of different ways. So overall, I'm just looking at cost, and if I'm pulling the trigger late to go with this one, if I'm pulling the trigger late as I can to get a league winner right now, it's going to be Kyle Pitts. Again, 88 on ESPN all the way down here. There are very few guys in this range with Kyle Pitts that I would have to be worried about going like, am I passing on a league winner? And that's why I have this pulled up. Like, the Kyle Pitts in this area, he falls to me. That's the guy I want. I can go up and get him a little bit early relative to some of the other guys that are out there, if some of these guys don't fall to what their ADPs are. And, that's generally the easiest way to look at it. I may have to go up and attack a Mark Andrews at his cost, 50 overall, and that's why I have this pulled up. I might have to go up a little bit to get a Mark Andrews early. About the only guys in this area, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, that I would be really worried about, like, missing on. Trey McBride, I might have to go up a little bit early on to go get him also. Dalton Kincaid, I also might have to go up a little bit early on to go up and get him. So I'm weighing these unicorn tight ends versus some of these quarterbacks in this range. And you're looking at like an Anthony Richardson, having to choose like a unicorn tight end versus an Anthony Richardson or a Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. You're going to have to make up your mind. The other thing with these unicorn tight ends is to sabotage my opponents and to make sure that I get one of these guys. I may end up taking more than one of these guys if they fall to me at cost. So even though I go up and get a Mark Andrews, it doesn't mean that Trey McBride or Dalton Kincaid can come off my board. Why? Because if I get a top 5 wide receiver, but I'm getting him at pick 50, 60, or 70, that's still a good pick. And as long as I can run 2 tight ends in that comp and I can get that unicorn, I'm still going to take that chance that I can get a unicorn at that at the cost going out. So Mark Andrews, probably the riskiest thing that you're looking at. And I look at Zay Flowers and I go like, I just don't know if he's going to end up being that number 1 in that offense. So at the price that Mark Andrews is going, if I generally get this like mid-range tight end 1, he's still cost effective enough to go like I punted. The other thing, there's a little bit more risk in him when it comes to like maybe Isaiah likely eats a little bit into the snap share. So they're trying to keep Mark Andrews a little bit more healthy. He does have diabetes. This generally has been a problem with him when it comes to like staying healthy. So when they have one of the better backup tight ends, I can see that eventually turning into a problem. So there is a little bit of risk, but you're weighing that against the theoretical unicorn season that you can get that return on. Could be or probably projects to be the number 1 in offense. It's just, I'm not going to overthink it too much. Trey McBride can't really use last year's stats apples to apples because of Zach Ertz being the number 1 to start the season, and then Trey McBride being the number 1 to end the season when it comes to the tight end. So the other thing to look at with Trey McBride is they bring in Marvin Harrison Jr. That probably may affect whether or not we can get a unicorn season out of Trey McBride. But what it doesn't necessarily mean is we can't get that sub-elite or elite type season from him. He only has to average about like 8 targets a game, which he was under then at the end of last year. So again, if he gets 8 targets a game, hey, that's Sam Laporta. But the difference between these two guys, and to bring up last year, Sam Laporta, 120 targets. That's 8 targets a game. If I get this year's Sam Laporta, but I'm only spending, where's it at? But I'm only spending like pick 60 overall on ESPN, and he's going 51 overall. Like it's still fine enough that if I get a mid-level tight end 1, I punted as with the upside that I could get the unicorn. That makes that very easy overall. The guy that I really like, and he is my tight end 1 overall, it's going to be Dalton Kincaid. So you're looking at 67 overall on Fantasy Pros. And then on ESPN, he's going 70 and to get an idea about this. So I would be interested in going up a little bit to go get Dalton Kincaid. The more I think about this, to go back to this one, the more I think about it with Dalton Kincaid, there is a lot of risk involved with Dalton Kincaid, but at the price that I'm going to spend on it, doesn't matter. Like, so generally speaking, from a strategy perspective, I don't like to risk my picks early on in the draft. As the draft goes on, like I can get a little bit riskier. It doesn't really matter if I miss a pick, 65 to 70. It's not going to really matter when it comes to Dalton Kincaid. With the theoretical upside that I can get a number 1 attached to one of the better quarterbacks in the league. That's the only story I got to tell. If I get 120 target Dalton Kincaid, I win. It's a punt at worst. So like that's what I would generally be looking at it. He would have to do generally less than 120 targets. He finished with 91 last year. With the vacated opportunities going into this year from Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. Like it shouldn't be that difficult to go at the price that he's going at. I want to pay to find out, because if I'm wrong, it does nothing other than like make me do what I do every year and go to the tight end wasteland on the waiver wire. Kyle Pitts projects to be the number 2. They brought in Kirk Cousins. Drake London's probably going to be the number 1. He's a year further removed from the knee injury that he had in 2020 or 2022. Like there's enough here to go like, what's it going to cost me to find out if I get an elite level tight end? And that's when it becomes like really, really, really crazy to go like, you mean I have to spend pick 50 in a wasteland where there's nobody else here that's going to win me a league. So on Fantasy Pros, he's going like pick 81, and there's no one else in this area that's really going to win me a league. So it's not too difficult to go like, this is the only guy that I'm going to be pulling the trigger on. Your ESPN leagues, and remember, you got to know your league, the personality of your league and the psychology of your league. He's going 88 on Fantasy Pros. There are guys in this area that I would be interested in. You're looking at like your Terry McLaurin's that I would generally be looking at going up and getting in this area overall. The other thing with Kyle Pitts in this area, in some leagues, you may have to start worrying about whether or not like your Jane Daniels are going to start coming off the board here. Also, the area that I would be starting to look at going up and getting your Ladd McConkey's relative to where he's going, depending on your leagues. Like he's going later, I think, on Fantasy Pros, so I'm a little less worried. Ladd McConkey 110, but on ESPN, this would be me knowing what my draft position is going to be and going and planning ahead of time, like where can I take the risk on certain picks. So in certain leagues, like for me to go and wait for a Kyle Pitts relative to some of the other guys that I have to start really looking at overdrafting to make sure I get like he's on the verge of that. But overall, like, yeah, there's not a lot of guys that I'm going to be overly worried about number 1s or number 2s in offenses. And that's going to be the end of the story on that. George Kittle was a guy that I generally was like, I don't know how he wins me a league. He's not going to be the number 1 or number 2 in an offense. When I was breaking down the stats for this, like this really started getting interesting because of how they use him. He's got like 8.3 yards per reception. I have the wide receivers pulled up here. So when we go, I want to make sure I have the right year. When we go find Debo and Brandon Ayuk. So Brandon Ayuk is at 12.8 yards per reception. And then Debo is down here at 6.1. So Debo is the check down monster. And then Ayuk is the efficiency, push the ball down the field type of guy. Now, I bring this up because we want not a tight end 3. And then when I go find like my George Kittle, he's at 8.3. They are using him more efficiently than they are Debo. So in a theoretical outcome, you could get the volume guy for a very good offense, and then it just becomes an issue of price shopping. So on Fantasy Pros, he's going 76 overall, and then on ESPN, he's going to go down here at 69. Like, very good punt. Like, that's all. Like, very good punt with upside built into George Kittle overall. So, like, not going to win me a league, probably, but like has the chance to allow me to do the closest I can to do that relative to the cost I put in there. If I'm concerned with the risk of your Mark Andrews, Trey McBrides, your Dalton Kincaids, and your Kyle Pitts. All right, I got Evan Ingram up X. He's going 85 on Fantasy Pros. On ESPN, he is going like 59. 59 is like way overvalued. The 85 on Fantasy Pros, like, I guess that's okay. And again, it just be the guys that I would be looking to punt on overall. I have this group of guys all the way down here with Evan Ingram. So this 143 targets that he had last year, I don't think it's something that's going to occur again this season. Again, I'm not drafting last year's production. I'm drafting this year's range of outcomes. This range of this last year's production, there was a story about what went on for this to occur. So last year, their starting three wide receivers were Zay Jones, Christian Kirk in the slot, and Calvin Ridley. And now what happened is there's a portions of the season where Zay Jones was injured and Christian Kirk was injured, and they basically used Evan Ingram as the check down monster, as the other wide receivers, Calvin Ridley, cleared the defense out vertically. So they went out and they let Calvin Ridley walk in free agency, and they released Zay Jones. They signed Gabe Davis, and we know what Gabe Davis's role in that offense is going to be because we watched it with the Bills. They drafted Brian Thomas Jr., who's a very interesting prospect to basically be moved around the formation and do a lot of things very well. He can play the short game. He can go vertical. He may be, a little underdeveloped, but he's a rookie. He doesn't have to take on that role. Christian Kirk can be the vertical slot. He can also play a little bit on the edge overall. So what we're looking at when it comes to Evan Ingram, and that's why I have good old stats pulled up last year. So last year with, if I can find the right one, last year with Kyle Pitts, to get an idea, Kyle Pitts is doing 10.1 yards per reception. He is going down the field vertically. We do like vertical shots out of our tight ends. We don't want check down monster tight ends. We want guys that are getting pushed down the field like a Trey McBride in this offense. So Evan Ingram last year, 4.0 yards per reception. The only guy that was really worse, that was a fantasy relevant tight end, was David Njoku. And I'm not going to really get that much into the Browns offense right now, but he was used a lot in the screen game when it came down to this. Like Evan Ingram, again, that check down monster, not being pushed vertically down the seam. He only had 9 red zone targets, also not the red zone guy in this offense. Brenton Strange, the rookie last year, second year tight end this year, in 3 less games than Evan Ingram, he had 4 red zone targets, to get an idea of what they want to use or how they want to use Evan Ingram when they get down in the red zone. They ain't throwing it to him in the red zone, and they ain't pushing him vertically down the field. So with Gabe Davis going vertically down the field, Christian Kirk going vertically down the field, and Brian Thomas Jr. theoretically to be either pushed vertically down the field or work the intermediate routes as that Z, it just turns Evan Ingram into that check down monster. Now they also have another check down monster that you can use in the offense, and that would be Travis Etienne. So you're looking at a very difficult story to go, well, how does he repeat what he did in 2023? Well, he probably can't without injuries. The other thing is, well, how does he become a unicorn tight end? Well, he probably can't, period. That's the end of the conversation when it comes to Evan Ingram. David Njoku, I said I was going to talk a little bit more about this offense. So at the beginning of the season last year, they were a run-heavy team, using David Njoku more as a check-down gimmick guy with the screen game. He is very good athletically. By the end of the season, they were running the highest neutral pace offense with Joe Flacco, and then they started pushing David Njoku vertically down the field. And that's where you started getting some of this stuff at the end of the season where he won leagues. Now, the hard thing when it comes to David Njoku, and he is going 91 overall on Fantasy Pros, and then on ESPN, to bring this back up, he's going 69 overall, and I probably would want pieces of the San Francisco offense and Dalton Kincaid over David Njoku in this range. On Fantasy Pros, that 91 overall, to bring this back up, you're looking at like Jake Ferguson, number 2, attached to that Cowboys offense, and those 23 red zone targets that I would be much, much more interested than David Njoku. Because right now with David Njoku, you're trying to tell the story where he can push over the age apex Amari Cooper out of the way and newly traded for and signed Jerry Jeudy out of the way to end up either being the number one and number two in that offense. And that's with the unpredictable play of Deshaun Watson and how the offense is going to function. I don't dislike David Njoku. I also don't like drafting unpredictability unless it works out in my favor. And at the price that he's going at, there are better guys that I can predict that road to be the number one and number two in the offense. That's the long and short of it with David Njoku. Now, Dallas Goedert, he is going 108 on Fantasy Pros. Like, I don't even have to think about him. He's the number three in the offense. I don't even have to think about more than once. Dalton Schultz, he's going to be the number 4 in this offense. Again, not something I need to worry about when it comes down to him. Maybe with Dalton Schultz, because of how high of volume passing this is going to be, it just becomes an issue of price shopping and going like, 132 overall on ESPN or 116 overall on Fantasy Pros to get a piece of this Houston offense. Like, maybe that interests me, but that's only if I'm missing on Andrews, McBride, Kincaid, Pitts, Kittle, and Jake Ferguson at cost. I still have Muth that projects to be the number 2 in that offense. If I'm pulling the trigger on a Dalton Schultz, I'm not trying to win my league. I'm at that pick. Again, punts are not bad in fantasy football. I just don't know how they win me leagues. All right. Going back to TJ Hawkinson, right now undraftable. He's going 122 on Fantasy Pros. On ESPN, he's up here at a ridiculous 90. He got that knee surgery done late. If I was really interested in chasing what projects to be a number 3 in an unpredictable offense, I'm going to pull the trigger on Robert Tonyan. And again, I don't even have the guts to do that. It's not a very good situation because of the quarterbacks, and it's also not a good situation because of the injury. So he can come off my board overall. Jake Ferguson, let's see. This tier of guys right here, this would be like my consolation prize. Jake Ferguson's, he's going 98 on Fantasy Pros. He is going 80, a better 87, and this is closer to where he should be going. He projects to be the number 2 attached to Dak Prescott, that Cowboys offense. Like, again, I don't have to overthink some of these guys. Do they project to be the number 1 and number 2 in offense? Yes, that's Jake Ferguson. 23 red zone targets last year. Okay, that's all I got to do. The one thing that bothers me a little bit more with Jake Ferguson relative to Kyle Pitts, both projecting to be the number 2s attached to higher volume passing offenses, is the Cowboys have Luke Schoonmaker, their second round draft pick 2 years ago. He should be coming back from injury. And if he comes back, like, maybe he's a little bit more athletically gifted than Jake Ferguson overall. We generally do like to go chase third-year tight ends with good athletic measurables. Jake Ferguson does not necessarily have good athletic measurables, but he is a third-year tight end. The other thing we do like going after is second contract tight ends tend to have a little bit more breakout with the good athletic measurables. And then you have Muth going down here at 121 on Fantasy Pros. He is going all the way down here at 133 on ESPN. And again, right now he projects to be the number 2 on offense. It may be a lower volume passing offense. I would be listening to whether or not Roman Wilson is going to be projecting to be the number 2 in the offense. But if it's Muth and you're getting a number 2, you're getting the possibility of that 998 yards and 10 touchdowns that Sam Laporta did last year, but you're going to spend like somewhere between like 133 and 121 to find out. Like, that's not hard overall in that one. A couple other guys to bring up in this, like Cole Kmet, he's going to project to be the number 4, so I don't care about him. Brock Bowers, I got a lot of interest in Brock Bowers because of the draft capital. There's a hard road with this. Like, he does project to be the number 2 behind Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is over the age apex. This is a lower volume passing offense. The big asterisk behind this, because of that draft capital and Michael Mayer being the theoretical starting like why, is I just don't know how they're going to use him in the offense. And we could get a unicorn type season from Brock Bowers that we can't predict ahead of time, where we may get some like design work in a way that other guys are not going to get from a fantasy perspective. And I'm not going to get like too into the weeds on this one, how I would use him from a fantasy perspective. But remember, like, 8 opportunities is going to be the line that we're looking for. And if we get over 8 opportunities, like, that's special. So in this case with Brock Bowers, even though this is a lower volume passing offense, can we get into the story of telling how Brock Bowers is going to get eight opportunities a game as the number 2 in this offense? That's all we really have to be talking about to say, like, is he worth drafting? And I think he is. But he is a lottery ticket later in drafts. Then Theo Johnson, because of the Darren Waller injury or retirement, I should bring up Daniel Bellinger while we're at it. So because of the Darren Waller retirement, there is a vacated opportunity when it comes to the Giants. Now, the Giants offense does not predict to be very good, but a number 1 or number 2 that's a tight end is always going to be fantasy relevant. So it really comes down between the athletic measurables of rookie 4th-round draft pick Theo Johnson or the theoretical breakout of 3rd-year tight end Daniel Bellinger. I would bet on Daniel Bellinger. I think he's a good prospect. He has good athletic measurables over Theo Johnson. But at this point, like, this is purely a waiver wire guy that I'd be looking for after week 1. Like, he hits that like 6 targets in week 1. You're looking at that guy that could like win leagues at that point in the draft overall. If Theo Johnson wins the job and they say like he's the starting tight end, we'd be doing the same thing. How many opportunities he has overall. You got your Lucas Kroll. He may end up being the starting tight end, good athletic measurable 4.6 guy. He may he may remove Adam Troutman and even like Greg Doltz from being the guy with the Broncos. A little bit harder road, but because we don't really know who the number 2 is going to be in that offense behind Cortland Sutton, like, we can project anybody that we want in there. So these are like deeper dart throws. Maybe Tommy Tremble is the starting tight end for the Panthers. Maybe it's Jatavion Sanders, the 4th-round pick. Like, the hard road to move Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson, and then 1st-round draft pick Xavier Leggett. But like, we can tell that story with some of these guys that are out there. And even though this projects to be a lower volume passing offense, and Michael Mayer, like, I could definitely see that the Raiders live in 2 tight end sets, and we could have another like Aaron Hernandez, Rob Gronkowski type of situation with the Raiders. Like, the rarity of all rarity, like 2 tight ends being fantasy relevant that are out there overall with these things. Some of the offenses that I'm not really interested in, the Rams, like Colby Parkinson is probably a tight end or a 6th offensive lineman. Will Disley's a 6th offensive lineman. Maybe there's a theoretical possibility that like Eric All, Mike Gesicki, or Tanner McLaughlin's going to end up being like the guy attached to this Joe Burrow Cincinnati offense. I would have a little bit of interest in that overall. Let's see if I got everybody. Goddard, Hawkinson, Bowers, Schultz, Komet, Tyler Conklin, like absolutely not. Like, he doesn't meet the criteria of good athlete pushing vertically down the seam, number 1, number 2 in an offense. Even if Mike Williams isn't healthy, I would still say that the number 2 in that offense is probably projecting to be like lower passing volume. Is going to be Brees. So I don't care. Jawan Johnson, Taysom Hill. There's the theoretical possibility that there's a number 2 available in that Saints offense. I would guess maybe it's going to be Rashid Shaheed. Could be one of these 2 guys. Jawan Johnson's injury is going to be what influences Taysom Hill maybe a little bit more. Overall, I would generally think that Taysom Hill is going to be a gadget guy, but if you're in deeper leagues and you miss on one of these targets, like, yeah, it could happen. Like, Chig's got a chance to be like the number 1, number 2, number 3 in what could be. And again, these are all theoreticals. I wouldn't be drafting these guys. Like, another reason why Sam Laporte is probably like very overvalued is I could definitely see that like Hunter Henry is the number 1, number 2 attached to the Patriots offense, and he has like that 800 or 900 yard passing season and like double-digit touchdowns. That could happen. Really like the Packers tight ends. A lot of mouths to feed in that offense, and there's 2 of them, so I don't really care. Maybe Noah Fant can magically appear like second contract tight end, good athletic measurables. He has to beat out both JSN and Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett is over the age apex. JSN may be athletically limited. There is a distinct possibility we could get Noah Fant breakout. K. Dotton, 3rd-year tight end, doesn't have athletic measurables, but we can talk about like Mike Evans being over the age apex in that one. Hayden Hurst, I already talked about this. I think that if there's a guy in this offense to own, it may end up being like Stuart Smart, like Stone Smart. He's a converted quarterback. I just don't generally think, even if he's the athlete, Jim Harbaugh probably wants like blockers. And in that case, that's where you're looking at The most fantasy relevant guy in this offense may be Will Disley, and that means that he's not fantasy relevant. This is another reason why like I'm so high on Ladd McConkey that's out there overall. Jonnu Smith may end up being the tight end 2 in an offense where even if he is the starting tight end, he may be the number 4, so gone. Dawson Knox, he may be the tight end 1 in this offense. But overall, like I don't see a road where he is the number 1 and number 2, even though like I can definitely see he could make Dalton Kincaid a bust overall. I doubt it. They restructured his contract. Jelani Woods is going to be really interesting. 3rd-year tight end, good athletic measurables. The problem with him is this offense is going to be unpredictable when it comes to what the passing situation is going to be like. And he has to beat Josh Downs, the rookie Adonai Mitchell, and Alec Pierce to move into that number 2 role for him to matter at this point. Like it's nice to say like he's going to break out, but he's not going to win you a league. Daniel Bellinger, he does have the ability to win a league because he gave me the number 1, number 2 in offense. So Tyler Higbee, he tore his ACL in the playoffs. Not going to be relevant this year. If you're chasing some of these guys, you got like Hunter Long or Davis, I think is the other guys. But the big one is like Colby Parkinson. Like they may end up running a lot of one tight end, like 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end personnel. Colby Parkinson is just going to be a 6 offensive lineman, and they can let Cooper Kupp and Puka be the 2nd tight end and block, and then run play action off of that. And it just doesn't matter. Like he's not going to hit the criteria of being the number 1, number 2. The number 3 likely for the Rams is going to be Demarcus Robinson. So just not going to be used in any way that matters, even if he is like any of these guys end up being the starter because of Demarcus Robinson that's out there. And then already talked about Colby Parkinson, Greg Dolch. Again, Lucas Kroll might be the guy down there. Ben Sinnott might end up being the this year's Sam Laporta. Like, and he's going like 32 or 191 tight end 32 on ESPN. He's going like basically undraftable. So like probably not a guy that I'd be interested in drafting. The dart throw for the Redskins that I'd be interested in drafting would be Luke McCaffrey, the wide receiver. But like we can tell the story with Ben Sinnott, how he's got value. So anyway, to recap, Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce are going to be overvalued. Mark Andrews is going to be undervalued as a target. Again, tight end 1, or we're looking for a top 10 wide receiver that we can slot into the tight end position. So that means the number 1 and number 2 in an offense, hopefully guys that are getting vertical shots, that are getting red zone opportunities. That's what we're looking for these guys. Mark Andrews meets those criteria. He's going under the value of Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce. I'm happy about that. Evan Ingram's overvalued. Trey McBride is appropriately valued, can be a unicorn in his offense. I like Kittle. I think it's going to be very difficult to evaluate David Njoku. Dalton Kincaid is going to be my unicorn. That's, I think, the best overall value cost relative to a reward is going to be Dalton Kincaid to be the tight end 1 overall. Jake Ferguson's going to have a lot of value, number 2 in his offense. Kyle Pitts, I think, is very undervalued, could be the number 2 in his offense, but more importantly, because of the overall passing volume and the athletic measurables, you are looking at the chance of having like a unicorn type season with him. Dallas Goedert's off my board. TJ Hawkinson's off my board. Brock Bowers is a little interesting. It's going to be unpredictable usage at this point. Dalton Schultz is going to be off my board. Certain builds, certain leagues. If you're going after CJ Stroud, there's a little bit interest in getting a piece of that offense cheap. Pat Freiermuth is probably going to be your last stop at getting a number 2 attached to an offense, and it's going to be a pretty ugly offense from a certain perspective. Cole Kmet, Tyler Conklin off my board, and there's a few other guys I talked about that I'd be interested in, like your Ben Sinnotts, your Daniel Bellingers, late in drafts overall. But the main 4 to be focusing on, I think, in most of your drafts are going to be like Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, and Kyle Pitts. And then punting on your Jake Ferguson's, your George Kittles, and your Pat Freiermuth. The last thing to talk about would be because of the theoretical upside of your Mark Andrews, your Trey McBrides, your Dalton Kincaids, and your Kyle Pittses. I would not be afraid to put 2 of these guys in my cart because, in most of your traditional leagues, if you have that flex spot, like you can run two tight ends. And if you are getting 2 top 10 wide receivers when it comes to points per game, you will objectively be using that guy relative to the cost that he's going at as a league winner. So that's be something I would be looking at overall. So anyway, that's about all I got for today, and hopefully I will get back and start breaking down the wide receivers.